Hi.
Dan, there's a spot right here in the shade.
So I'd like to make some remarks, but I thought we could start with Monica to set an appropriate tone. And Jane, you probably want to say something.
Yeah, just we're so grateful to have this time together right now, and this beautiful sunny, warm day. Eric and Kara's home, so nice to be here. And Monica, we're just so grateful. You've been such a big part of Mom's life for the last 10 years, and we just couldn't imagine, saying farewell together without you here. So we're just grateful that you're able to be with us.
Me too. Thank you for the invite. I'm glad it worked out. It's a beautiful setting to remember her.
Yeah, just lovely.
I'm glad you're so flexible.
Oh, I'm happy to. I spend every Sunday with Carolyn, so this is apropos.
Yeah. And our brother, so Mark, sadly had to leave because his wife wasn't well, but, so he's sorry to miss it, but Megan's recording it.
Yeah, I'm glad about that.
Yeah. And Jeffrey's with us. He wishes he were here, but what our plan is, we'll talk later about our plan for Mom's final resting place and let you know what we're going to do next. But Monica, over to you.
All right.
And anyone else that would like to speak after Monica and myself as well.
And if you need to shift your seats, mid
Playing Sunday.
service, go right ahead. Go right ahead. Well, I'm Monica Powers, chaplain over at Jones Harrison. And, when you were mentioning one of you was mentioning the 10 years, I started there as an associate chaplain 22 years ago this month. And so been their chaplain 10 years this year, 20. And so she's been there half of my time. Mm-hmm. And there are many people that work at Jones Harrison who have only known Jones Harrison with Carolyn in it, because she started in our assisted living, and then she was in one section of the nursing home, and then she was in another section of the nursing home. So literally, so many people knew her and Eric and Kara a lot since you lived so close, and it's really an honor to be here and for Eric and Jane to invite me to be here with you. Carolyn and I just had an affinity for Carolyn because I love to sing. So immediately we connected around music. And I just love that. And I had also lived in New York City for a couple of years. And so I had been to the Finger Lakes on a number of occasions for retreats with teenagers that I worked with. And I said, so I know you're from Schenectady, but just don't ask me to spell it. And she would just, die laughing. Any inroad of humor, even if it was corny, she still laughed at my jokes, which is really a nice thing. And I'm very thankful that you are, that Rafa is here, and also that you're recording it so that your brothers can be a part of this. When we remember someone, we remember who brought them into the world and the people that they brought into the world. And I didn't get this information, but could you just tell us her parents' names, please?
Her mom was Minnie O'Brien, and her dad was Frederick O'Brien.
And Frederick O'Brien, okay.
And he had passed away serving in the Army when Mom was only 4 years old or so.
Yes.
So Minnie raised her along with the help of her two older sisters.
Oh, okay. And then she was an only child, so I've got it. So thank you.
She felt like an only child because her older sisters were.
Oh, she did have. I see. Okay, then maybe she had alluded to that. Well, thank you. So we thank God for their presence in the world. And one of my first such endearing memories that Carolyn shared with me, I'll mention children here in a moment more. One of the most endearing memories is that she said, I guess since her sisters were that much older, she kind of grew up by herself. And she would always tell me that her father had died when she was 4 years old. And she said one of her favorite memories, and I'm thinking this is when she was like 3, one of her earliest memories. She said that when her father would come home, and and I never know if like the details that someone gives me is, accurate, but that's not really what's most important. What's really most important was just kind of this aura that she had of love for her father. When she said he was on his way home, he would walk down the block. So she would wait for him at the front steps. And then she said, and I would run to him and he would pick me up. And I mean, who doesn't like that? What a great, great message of her father's love when she lost him while he was in the Army. Is that right? So that's one of the immediate memories that I remembered when I found out that Carolyn had died. And one of the things of unique things about death is that we have memories of things we haven't thought about maybe in decades or even since they happened. It's like we're invited to look through the book of our lives with that person in it. And I don't know, the brain just brings those up in grief. And I'm really glad you're having this service because, as you know, I mean, constant I check obituaries every day, and so many have been postponed. And I feel like there's going to be sort of this missing grief piece in our societal grief in this country, and around the world. So kudos for having this. It might not look like you wanted it that you would pre-COVID, but it is the beautiful day that is meant to be in this day and time. So now that I know she did have sisters, what were her sisters' names?
Janet and Eunice.
Janet and Eunice. And so they were about 10, 12 years older than Carolyn. So then we think of your father's name was Bob. Okay. It's the simple names that I don't recall very easily. If it's Eunice, I got it. But Bob.
I said, oh, I forget about that.
And then Carolyn's children, we think of them. I know most all of you are relatives, but we've got some. I'm not the only non-family member here. So Carolyn's children, Eric and his partner Kara, thank you for hosting this. Your home is beautiful and very calming, and what a beautiful, beautiful place to remember her. And Jane, Bill, who was deceased. How old was he when I had forgotten that?
His mid-30s.
In his mid-30s. Okay. To imagine the loss of a child, even if there was a point where she forgot that she had lost a child, it's an indelible impression on one's life, forever indelible. And then Mark and his partner Kanlanya, she wasn't feeling well earlier. She has 2 sons, so I'm glad you're recording this. And then Jeffrey, not here today, but again, I'm glad you're recording it. And so we think of the 2 of them, 2 people unable to be here. As we continue, I want to read this beautiful poem titled Leave Taking. And it mentions nature a lot. And it seems like that love of music was in tandem with her love of nature. And of course, so much music alludes to nature, is written in nature. And so I thought this was apropos for her today. When death begins to call. When the coming of your death became an awareness on the planet, some wondrous events began. The word went out that you were preparing to leave this place that you call home. The word was heard by a wolf. The word was heard by the wind, and it promised to blow under you and push you. The clouds heard the wind and billowed for joy. You may land on us and float for a while, they said. The rain said, I'll wash the air clean, while each star polished itself to a brilliant shine. In the presence of your impending death, the earth prepared to send you forth. The gravity that had held you so tightly began to lose its grip. It called, let loose, let loose, let loose and fly. As you began to float, a squirrel noticed and remembered how you saved those things that were important. He told the rabbit, who told the turtle, who told the bird, she's coming, they whispered. The bird sang your memories a joyous release. That song was heard by a lone wolf. The lone wolf stood on a cold tundra, howling her appreciation of all the lessons you learned so well. Some distant great pines heard the howl and knew of your leaving. They swayed, releasing their fragrance to waft with you. The fragrance was gathered in by the swiftest of hawks, flown high with the wisdom that the great hawk knows. The hawk told a passing eagle, who swooped and soared until, finding your spirit loose on the wind, carried it forward into a joyous rainbow. The rainbow said, come, I've been waiting. The colors are all for you. When the moon heard this, it shouted, prepare, a life well lived is approaching. The stars again polished their shine until the illumination penetrated the system. Your soul saw and knew it was going home. Home to the light, home to the sun, and home beyond home, beyond home. And it met with all that it had always known, the silent and brilliant mystery, the source. The entire mystery burst with the splendor of, welcome, welcome, we have been waiting. The source, with all the ancestors gathered round, enfolded you and danced at your coming. While far away in the world you had known, a group of your loves and friends gathered to speak your praises, to sing of your leaving, and to forever remember. Excuse me. Okay, so that was the first story about her. I love children too. So that was probably a shared affinity with Carolyn as well. I could just imagine her little 2-year-old legs. 2-year-olds love to just run anywhere they're allowed to. And one of the many hard things about the shutdown is that family members couldn't be there, of course, but the children of those families, grandchildren, great-grandchildren that we, previously would see a kid learn to walk, to toddle, and then to walk, and then to run down those long hallways. They loved those. But when we were able to have children, and then kind of in recent months we're able to have children come in again. Oh, you talk about a magnet for Carolyn. She loved watching them, along with a lot of other residents and staff who loved watching them. And this morning, actually, the lectionary reading this morning was an account of where Jesus was with some of the disciples. They were in Capernaum, and on the way, these disciples were arguing about who was the greatest. And when they got to Capernaum, Jesus said, what were you arguing about? And they said, well, who's the greatest? And he took a child, and he pointed out this child, said he held the child, and said, whoever loves a child like this, that person is the greatest. And if that's the case, and I'm going to assume Carolyn believed that, she loved God with all her heart. She saw God's face, the creativity, the insatiable curiosity that children have. She saw that in people. She brought it out in people. You know how you hear stories about somebody who wanted to sing in choir and they said, well, I have a horrible voice, so I don't sing. That's always very sad to me. I'm sure it was sad to your mom. I can just imagine she was not one of the ones that said, you know what, you need to be in the back row. You know what I mean? I'm sure she brought out the marvelous gifts in all of her students. I said, Carolyn, I said, only God knows, firstly, how many students you ever had taught piano lessons to. All the people that were in your choirs, whether it was school, but I know for sure that she was a church choir director. All the people that you have taught piano to, a lot of them taught piano to their own children, or if they became a musician, I'm sure some of her music students became musicians themselves. What an indelible impression on the world you have had. And she'd say, really? You know, in her later days. And one of the things that we're so fortunate to have at Jones Harrison is we don't have independent living, but we have assisted living. When someone's a little bit more able to remember some of the things that define their lives, and by the time they lose some of their memory, we already know some of that stuff. So everybody knew that she was a musician. All the musicians that I work with knew that she was a musician. We all know that she sang at Carnegie Hall in a choir, which was conducted by Robert Shaw. Is that correct? And having lived in New York City, I was like, oh my gosh, we've got other musicians at Jones Harrison. So to make those connections with and for her was really a deep, deep blessing in it. And I am simply the representative of hundreds of staff of every department who cared for her and who cared for her dad. I think most of your dad, Dan's dad, and Carolyn had what I called a later in life love, where they just selected each other, and so many of us, it brought joy to so many of us that they had this love for each other. And it obviously has continued to bless both families, hence your presence here, Dan. And I also bring you condolences and the thoughts and prayers of the whole worship community at Jones Harrison. I described Carolyn this morning and said I was going to be here for a cookout and that we were going to have this time of remembrance. And one woman after the service came up to me and she said, I want to talk to you. Sometimes when someone says that, it's like a 5-minute thing, sometimes 50-minute thing. So I'm like, well, I'm keeping it in the back of my mind. I'm needing to make my way over here. So it was Joanne Judson, whose husband, she lives in our assisted living. Her husband was there for a while. And I don't know if her husband and Carolyn sat at the same table there, or if it was on the second floor. But they both love music. And she brought it out in him and him in her. There's a card over there from Joanne. She said, what time are you leaving? I told her, she said, I'll be right back down with a card for Carolyn's family. And being a musician, part of your job is to bring out every person's strong suits in a choir. And I can easily see how she did that because she brought it out in us. When we were traveling, when I was a kid, sometimes, when we would be in a certain state and one of my parents had a college roommate or whatever that lived there, we'd go and stay with people. It's also less expensive than that. And I got to know marvelous people from my parents' lives, but I still remember that if we were there for a long weekend, the night before we were to leave, Dad would call all of us in. I'm second of 4 girls, and so I always knew when Dad said, girls come in here that you needed to be there like 5 minutes ago. And he'd say, now I want you to listen up. And he said, not tomorrow morning, but tonight, I want each of you to go to your rooms where you were staying, and I want you to make it cleaner. I want you to make it better than the way you found it when you got there. Well, if people are going to have guests over, it's already looking pretty darn good. So we thought, well, you know, what are we going to do? But the point was, he said, I want you to look under the beds to get your stuff. I want the bathroom to look really nice. And I have thought of that thousands of times. In that our Creator, and I guess regardless of one's religious or spiritual beliefs or having none as well, we know that we're invited, hopefully that we're invited to leave this world a better place than the way we found it. And if, you know, Carolyn left this world a better place than the way she found it. So did her parents, so did her sisters, so did you kids and grandkids. I mean, I could just kind of hear it in the conversation. You're leaving this world a better place than the way you found it. And if we can take just that one thing, or, you know, we're the beneficiaries of all different things, depending on what relationship we had with Carolyn. And some of you might not have known Carolyn, but you're in, you know, Carolyn's family. When we talk about, when you start a job and you start a new insurance or something, they want to know who your beneficiaries are, and you list those. And if there's a subtraction or an addition in your family, you change up those percentages and stuff. And the nice thing is, if somebody's got 5 kids, you know, 5 kids, you can't divide up, you know, a family desk or something in 5 parts. You can't do it evenly. You can't, I guess you could divide up parcels of land, you know, to a fifth for each person. And usually when we talk about things that we're beneficiaries of, it's tangible, they're tangible things. It might be land, might be money that's been earned or that's been given, property, it might be special jewelry or other possessions. But you've got to give this object to that person and this object to that person. You can't give a fifth of each thing. But fortunately, you and I are not just the cars we drive and the money that we've been given or earned, or our land or houses. It's not just tangible things that we have. It's the intangibles, and those tangible things are going to run out. But someone's love, their character, their love of beauty, of the natural world, the music world, whatever they love the most, their passions, their values, the things that they thought were most important in this world, those are things that we inherit that don't have to be divided. Carolyn could give 100% of her love to you, and 100% of her love to you, and 100% of her love to her grandkids, the people that came into the grandkids' lives. She could give 100%. And so you and I are very enriched beneficiaries of what she had in her life. And I hope that you spend those things that you have inherited. I hope you spend them well. I hope you spend them on fun things. I hope you spend them on things that will create joy, not only for yourself, but for other people. And if we do that, we will be remembering Carolyn Larsson in the best way possible. And she would have the biggest smile. You know, I love getting that big smile from her, from ear to ear and then some. You know, I'm going to close with, so I guess it's kind of a religious thing, because, and I do think I should get a couple points for alliteration here, because one of the other, because there are several stories that equally came to my mind when she died, about Carolyn's Christmas caroling coffee cakes. That's 5 C's. That's pretty good. So Carolyn and she'd say like maybe September, October, would start getting phone calls from people in her choir or in the church to say, so, Mrs. Larsson, we're just curious when the date is for the Christmas caroling. And she'd say there was a reason they were asking it. She said, it might be that they wanted to Christmas carol, but here's the real reason they had. And the reason was when they would go back for hot chocolate and Christmas cookies and stuff after Christmas caroling, and only God knows what kind of weather in Schenectady you could have for Christmas caroling out of the blue. When they left, she would hand every family unit a coffee cake so that they could take it up. She said, you know, they could eat it as it was, or they could heat it up. I mean, she started listening these ways. I mean, I could almost taste the coffee cake. And she told me about it. And that kind of community, I mean, I'm sure some of those kids always remember that. They probably grew up and went Christmas caroling with another group, and they were like, so where are the coffee cakes that come with this Christmas caroling cake, you know? So that's just a example of the memories that I have, and I hope some of those memories that you have had, either those of you who knew Carolyn, or I'm just thinking some of you friends who may not have known her as much, learning about Carolyn hopefully has helped you understand and appreciate the people in Carolyn's family that you do know, have an enriched experience of their lives. And so I will, I want to read a prayer. You're welcome to keep your eyes open during this. O God, our strength and our Redeemer, giver of life and conqueror of death, we praise you with humble hearts. With faith in your great mercy and wisdom, we entrust Carolyn Larsson to your eternal care. We praise you for your steadfast love for her all the days of her earthly life. We thank you for all that she was to those who loved her, and for her faithfulness to the Church of Jesus Christ. The many religious choirs she was in, the church in which her mother was the organist, pianist, and choir director when she was growing up. The churches, multitudinous churches, I'm sure, that she worked with as a musician, and also to our congregation, our faith community at Jones Harrison. We're thankful for what she meant in that gathering of people. We thank you that for Carolyn, all sickness and sorrow is ended, all dementia, all frustration, and death itself is past, and that she has entered the home where all your people gather in peace. You're welcome. And as the benediction for my part, as we go from this place, brothers and sisters, let us remember that our fragile and precious lives pass far too quickly, and we have but little time to gladden the hearts of those who travel the way with us. So let us be swift to love. Let us make haste to be kind. And as we go, may the joy, the peace, and the hope of this place go with us and remain with us always. Peace be with you and with all whom you love, wherever they may be, near or far. Amen. Carolyn has heard me say that hundreds of times probably. So all of you, from here, near or far, have been in our thoughts and in our prayers through these many years. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Are you okay, Sarah?
I'm okay.
Well, Mom, what's all those things that Monica's captured so nicely. So I'm going to just say a few things, varying off of what Monica was saying. I really want to stress throughout everything I say, I love you, Megan. Sarah hears so much. She made a point of being there at each of your births, despite as busy as she was with everything she was doing. And she grew up in the Great Depression, 10 years after the Spanish flu, and died during the COVID years. And I think one thing that really tells me is she knew what she valued, she knew what her values were, and she always took time for them, because you never know what's coming tomorrow. None of us, the world we're living in today, 3 years ago, none of us would have ever said, this is what it's going to be like 2 years from now. And people, unexpected passings of people that we love happen all the time. And not just because of COVID, but every day people. I think of Sarah Bachman, if you're somewhat named before, who died a year after her wedding at the age of 22. She didn't know. She felt like she was having trouble walking down the aisle. Didn't know that she had leukemia until she was diagnosed after her wedding, and was dead a year later. And what that always reminds me is Mom knew what she valued, and as busy as she was as a director of Christian education, choir practice on Saturdays, leading the choirs on Sundays, working during the week, raising our family. She took the time to do what she valued. So we're going to Disney. We're paying. Anybody wants to come? We're paying for it. They went to Disney World more than once a year. They're throughout Mom and Dad's married lives. Once Disney World started in the early 70s when I was in high school, and they valued that. And that was something that they took time to do. And the Christmas caroling parties, all the preparation, not just baking all the coffee cakes, but baking tins and tins and tins of Christmas cookies and having them all ready and doing that every year. She didn't have to do that, but the house was filled with happiness and excitement. People wanted to come and be there because she lived what she valued. But she also, as much as she came from a conservative, super conservative, rock solid Christian, from her point of view, background, here we are. We know what's right in the world. This is the way everybody should live, was the way Mom grew up. And Dad grew up. Dad also came from a super conservative religious background, a fire and brimstone type minister in New England Congregational Church. They really knew what was right for people. And just one example, my brother Bill, when it became apparent, and he didn't tell anybody that he was gay, but when by mistake my parents discovered he was gay, and then he went on to die of AIDS. Mom, again, was still in this very conservative culture where she's the director of Christian education at a leading church in Schenectady, and her own minister ostracized her and worked hard until she managed to retire some 5 years later to oust her out of her position in the church. And despite all that, Mom loved Bill. She was all about Bill. As shocked as she was again, coming out of that history of, I'm sure she was just as biased against folks who were gay as anyone. But she valued Bill, she loved Bill, and it just didn't happen to her. And my father, too, I remember discovering a letter that her father wrote to the hospice after Bill died. And just praising them, forgiving Bill. What they gave to him. And at the same time, living in a culture where people were, at the same time, living in a culture where I'm sure many of their friends and associates just couldn't even understand this. And back in the early 90s, we weren't, the whole United States wasn't eager to help out people suffering from AIDS. And yet mom and dad were able to grow and live their values and love their children unequivocally. So Bill didn't have to do anything special to earn their love. I'm sure God and whatever preconceptions came along, it just didn't matter to them. So partly I just want to say what they did model for me is know what you value and do it. You don't know what's happening next year, next month, tomorrow. You sure don't want to have all these regrets, things you wish you'd done and you never got around to. Mom and dad certainly did. They lived their values. They did what was important to them. They got rewards over and over from them. And so I urge you both all to know what you really value and seek it out and do it and live it, and also not dwell on the preconceptions of 5 years ago. What's socially just. Things are changing. Things are changing rapidly. They're going to keep changing. I want to honor mom and dad and the model they gave me, being able to embrace the future and continue to raise their own values. So.
Everything Eric said, we lived through together, and those are painful moments. But absolutely true. I think the greatest gift that mom gave us and our father was unconditional love. And I think that's why we've been able to, survive really challenging situations like I'm sure each of you had in your life, really painful things that were unexpected. But I think overall what I just want to remember today is, and just picking up on what Monica said, mom did grow up pretty much alone. She was by herself a lot as a young child, and we'll talk about that. And what mom hated more than anything was being alone. So guess what she did? 5 children. We always had multiple cats, dogs, and our house was the house where all our friends came. And when mom passed away, one of my close friends, Anne, who lived across the street from us, the Petersons for 6 years, she called. She goes, "I'm a wreck." She goes, "I wasn't this sad when my own mother died." She's like, "Your mom, I always sat in the kitchen. She always had a cake. I always ate the cake. Your mom always reassured me, She drove us to choir practice. When I saw a dog locked in the car, your mom said, 'Anne, you're so empathetic.' She said, 'She gave me confidence, your mom.' She goes, 'I'm just a wreck.'" She was just, and so I just will go over to our other friend's house, Lynn, and make her hug you, or something. So she was ready to fly here, But I think, just for all of you to know, it wasn't just us. There were so many people who, as you've all noticed, have benefited from our parents' care and my mother's care, and she just loved that. And I only hope that in her final days, we told her over and over, "You're not alone." That was the most important message for me to get across. We're here, and we're okay, because you made us be okay. Now, what we are going to do is mom also, because her sisters were older than her, as you heard. Well, also my dad was 12 years older than mom. loved equally to us. She was so proud, and they're all wonderful, caring human beings. And so next May, we're hoping to scatter Mom's ashes, hoping because of COVID, but our goal is to go to the North Shore of Massachusetts, where our dad is buried. Our grandmother's family fought and scattered Mom's ashes, and we have a gravestone marker there. And I'm sure many of our cousins are all going to try to come and be there too. So, and those cousins were so close to her because a lot of them were closer to her own age, obviously that it was kind of that intergenerational thing. You get where I'm going with that because of the age difference. So we're looking forward to being reunited with them. We're looking forward to hoping our youngest brother Jeffrey will be well enough to be there at that time, and Mark too. And yeah, thank you all so much for being here today. And I know some others of you and Sarah, you've got something that you'd like to share too. And anybody else who'd like to share something, we would love to hear it. So, do you want to talk next, Sarah?
To my dad. Who actually have words from my mom, who also loved Grammy so much. I think he's so inspired by Grammy's, like, I don't know, strong-willed, brilliant, wasn't forgetting himself when I'm part of the works of family as well. So she sent some words to read. She says, "Dear Sarah, Mears, Megan, Eric, Jane, Mark, and Jeff, my thoughts are with you today as you mourn, remember, and celebrate your Grammy and Mom. I will always remember and be grateful for my first meeting with her almost 50 years ago, eating her amazing cooking and immediately feeling her warmth and kindness. I will always remember and be grateful for her loving care of not only Sarah and Mears, but also me after their births. I will always remember and be grateful for her humanity and generosity, as well as," it's a list, "her Swedish tearings, knitted stockings, music sung and played, her squirrel feeding voice, oft told stories of hockey games and math professors, her love and support of her grandkids, beef stroganoff, gardens, the original Betty Crocker cookbook, needlework, cheese balls, Jell-O salad, falling asleep in movie theaters, that is true, late night conversations about motherhood, caroling parties, Disney World, and bird feeders. I will always remember and be grateful for when she embraced me as part of the family. I wish you all peace in her memory. Yeah. And I thought I also would share some music, but maybe at the end. So maybe.
Dan, would you like to come up and mention your dad?
Well, in my frequent visits to Jones Harrison at the dinner table, there would be Dad, and I would be between he and Carolyn. I wanted to make sure I was between them. But they held hands quite a bit, and they really kept each other's spirits up. And in what Eric said, I really got to know your mom and got to know what was important to her and her values. And what came forward was always, in her declining memory, drilled into my head, Jane's got a great job in the Netherlands. Dr. Eric, my wonderful Mark, who's a chef, and those were, and her Jeffrey and all of her grandkids and her family, those were what was the most important to her. And repeatedly, she would sometimes forget she just told me that, but she would tell it again, and I would savor every word that she said. And but I think that really the most important was her singing at Carnegie Hall, conducted by Robert Shaw. It was very important to her too. But thank you for letting me be a part of your family and to honor your wonderful mom.
And I treasure, we'll stay up for a second. I just treasure what your dad did for me. She really was declining until she met Arnie. And he had just moved on to the third floor, so she
Mhm.
And he was so vibrant, so positive and gregarious. At first, I think Mom just thought he's directing his personality to her on purpose, like he must be flirting. But I learned very quick, well, this is just Arnie. but what a wonderful guy. He was always wearing his veteran's hat, which felt special to me because both my dad and Arnie were World War II Navy veterans.
That's right.
And, so it was kind of really fitting that he was there for her.
Well, they were a blessing to each other and to all of us. So thank you for sharing her with us.
Thank you for sharing it today. Memories that I forget. We spent so many hours and hours and hours. And of course, we knew Mom before she moved out here to go to Jones Harrison about 10 years ago. But Kara spent more time with staying overnight at the hospitals and things. And when I'm out of town, Kara's in the hospitals or at Jones Harrison with Mom. And you might have a couple of stories you want to tell. You always tell the funny ones.
Well, I'll share two stories. One is more about my experience with your mom. And then I also want to share a story about her love for Jane and Eric and Harvey and Jeff and Bill. So the first story, for those of you that don't know, Eric and I have been partners for about 20 years. And one of the things I was struck in the obituary we put together about was your discussion about community. And I was thinking how really our first community is our family. And so I'm coming into this community, not of the origin, but sort of joining after some time. And as with any community or family, there's sort of shared languages and shared behaviors and shared habits. And so I remember one of my first visits to Jane's home in North Carolina for Christmas. We were driving in a car somewhere, and all of a sudden your mom is reading Arby's, Target, 7-Eleven. And then your dad starts chiming in, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Kmart, and then Eric is chiming in, and Jane is, and I'm thinking, what is going on? So everybody's reading all the street signs around, and so that was one sort of shared community, family experience that I learned about. A second was.
Did you follow up with it then?
A second was, regardless of who sort of started the tune, so maybe your mom started a tune or Eric started a tune, everyone would chime in, there's a great big beautiful tomorrow, which is a Disney
Shining
theme
at
song.
the end of every day.
And again, I was like, what is going on here? And then another was at Christmas time, whenever one opens up their Christmas package, there's the obligatory, very good. So over time, I got the chance to witness those things, and in the time that your mom was now here in Minneapolis, there'd be occasions where we would be driving, and I would find myself looking out the window and saying, Target! Kentucky Fried Chicken! And so that made me realize that I was now part of this community.
Yeah, I remember the first time how embarrassed Kara was that I caught her doing it. After I'd been hearing about it for a while.
Or at Christmas, kind of finding myself, making the obligatory very good. Or, So my second memory I'd like to share, and of course I wish that Mark and Jeff were here, but as Eric said, in the last 9 or 10 years we've spent a lot of time with Carolyn, and all wonderful. And as with most of us, life is about change, and she had a lot in her last 9 or 10 years, moving to a new state and a new home and different medical procedures. And, all the stories about the music being powerful, Christmas being powerful are all true. level of ability she had. Sometimes we would talk about each of you, sometimes we might look at a picture, but it always calmed her in a way that nothing else did. She would immediately sort of relax and calm.
And there were many times where she was really irate and upset and scared and anxious.
Yep, and we just start counting on our fingers. We've got Eric, we've got Jean, and in the last week of her life, Eric and I had the great fortune of seeing her on a day where she was very alert and, able to answer some yes and no questions and talk a little bit. And we kept asking her, do you want to stay or do you want to go back to your room? And no, I want to stay. So we kept talking and talking. And then towards the end, we started saying, we've got Eric, we've got Jane, we've got Bill and Mark and Jeff. And she then asked, even though she was having so much trouble speaking that day, where are the children? And so we were then able to talk about each of you and then ask, are you ready to go back to your room or do you want to stay? She said, I'm ready to go back to my room now. And that was the last time we had that level of engagement.
She started naming off the grandchildren after we went through the children's names.
So you all were such a source of comfort for her.
Piano here or something
She
like
had
that.
a grand piano in her house in Schenectady.
Oh, she did.
And it
Okay.
couldn't even be moved.
Couldn't be moved. Okay. So I knew it was either she had to be separated from her piano, and she was upset about it one day, and so Joanne said, "Well, Carolyn, pianos are meant to be used and played and enjoyed by people. Like, just think of people, a family that's enjoying that piano." And boom, that was, it's kind of like you bring up the family members. Boom, as soon as she thought of it in that way, she was like, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Joanne's a special person.
Yes, she is.
Being able to say that, it didn't occur to me to say that.
Right.
With her buying a piano for our house for me and Sarah, it really did inspire me. I remember when I was just a little kid, she gave me my first ever piano lesson, and I remember I really didn't want to do it, but she really wanted to teach me the piano, and she taught me, and then I went on to take lessons on my own, and now even into my adult life, I took lessons again, and all sorts of other instruments. So just that saying about leaving the world better than you left it, she really just inspired me so much in that regard.
Mm-hmm. She loved hearing that you were getting good at the piano.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of attribute all my love for music and playing instruments and things like that to her, so it really means a lot to me.
What do your parents
Even though-
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, there was just a lot of piano time at their house in Schenectady that was spent one or the other of us not actually playing piano, but just playing the pre-recorded demo tracks on that. He's like, Grammy, listen to this one. Yeah. I'm still working on sorry. But there is another, maybe this is a little bit more of a Papa story than a Grammy story, but from the same visit in North Carolina. I wasn't even there, but you guys have told this story so that you all were in the family room watching maybe the movie Love Actually, like a fairly mundane, like non-scandalous movie that has like one or two scenes with like a bare chest in it for a second. Okay, well, but it seemed that every single time Papa came downstairs to decide to join the family watching the movie would be one of the slightly steamy moments. It was like,
That is true. That is true.
So all the way up, Jane had this like triple floor to ceiling living room, and the TV's right there in the living room, and you walk up the stairs along the balcony to go to your bedrooms. And as soon as a steamy scene was starting, you'd hear the door opening from his
Papa's
bedroom.
trying again.
Oh, here he comes again. He'd get all the way down and he'd realize what's on. Shush!
But which I do feel like it also is a Grammy story in that as a grandchild, I feel like Grammy was often the grandparent who was kind of like up for anything. You know,
Watching
like
all
yeah,
those
she would watch the movie if you guys were like, you know, like watching an action, like a James Bond movie or something, and then she was like, great, like just the time to be together, you know, with my sons, my grandkids.
She was never going to bed before
Never gonna go to bed before. Yep, didn't matter what, if we were gonna play video games for hours.
Yeah.
Grammy was
She was
gonna be
in.
there on the couch enjoying whatever.
We'd always have to kick her out of the TV room so that we could enjoy the movies we wanted to watch.
She would have been there otherwise.
Yeah, she would have stayed.
Well,
Time for music.
and maybe more songs too, whenever, or if anyone wants. Yeah. Also, a thing that I just wanted to take a moment in the spirit of remembering to do. There are so many stories, but a thing that in the last couple of days has just been coming up, maybe the most powerfully for me, is remembering the sound of Grammy's voice. So I can't convey that, but maybe if you want to just think for a moment and remember either that really particular, just melodious, high, joyful laughter when something adorable would happen. Or she just had such, you know, very much like a singer's voice, like a soprano voice, when she was really enthusiastic about something, expressing delight at seeing us grandchildren. Yeah, the sound of her laugh, or her singing voice singing along with something. So so particular and so like crystal clear.
That was a good memory.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to play this. This is actually a song that I wrote, I guess. The time when I was visiting you all in Leiden over Easter, I went and took a walk. And over by the canal, and the song I was on that walk, and it's not a song about passing. It's not a song about. If anything, it's a song about making the most of life while we have it. So, yeah.
Sweet.
Beautiful, Sarah.